Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our podcast.
Today we're looking at the film Dolittle starring Robert Downey Jr.
And in this new remake of the Dolittle character, the titular doctor was once an adventurer who rescued and took care of animals in need. But after his wife died at sea, he became a recluse, never to open the door or heart again. So basically, there's a long description for this movie. But what we're going to let you know is, short version, this Dr. Dolittle is not Eddie Murphy. It's not as fun. It's more true to the original story. And he's trying to save his wife.
Yeah. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, notification bell to get updates on future podcasts and Mold and Pause videos.
Yes. This is not the one that you probably remember either as a child or an adult watching the Eddie Murphy trilogy that starred Penny Proud as his daughter.
Right. And we actually saw there was also another Dolittle before the Eddie Murphy one where he was more of a geek and the people thought he was a weirdo and didn't deal with him. So in each one is sort of like a different take. So this one goes for more adventurous.
And then we happenstance upon the original version that was made, I think, in the late 50s or early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
It was on one of the retro channels. And we watched it for about 10 to 15 minutes and then it just couldn't hold our interest. I think it was that Dr. Dolittle probably was more of a period piece in terms of for the time it came out, it probably was very popular.
Right.
But for now, it just didn't hold our interest.
Right.
So, in walks Robert Downey Jr., not as Iron Man, but as Dr. Dolittle.
Right. And it's sort of the first movie you see after Avengers Endgame is sort of like, okay.
But he's still in here as Spider-Man.
Right. And when you first see the movie, like in the trailers and things, it's a little misleading. They portray it as him being an adventurer presently. He's going to these exotic places for adventure and helping and saving animals and things. But it turns out that was like before you see the movie take place. That's what he did with his wife. And apparently she died at sea without him. And then the rest of the movie is him being a hermit, and he only talks to the animals. He refused to talk or trust humans.
And I accidentally said trying to save his wife, and I meant save the queen of people.
Oh,
forgive me.
Oh, sorry. And it's sort of sad because I kind of thought they were gonna do this thing where, oh, turns out she's not gone, and they'll find proof that she's still alive, and then and then it's like, no, this is it, and he's got to move on. It was sort of like, oh, that's okay. It's sort of got a bitter sweetness to it.
And in here, he was also more curmudgeon-y. Mm-hmm. You know, he was bitter, he was upset, he was a recluse, he didn't want to deal with people. And the animals knew the truth about him, of course, but the people didn't.
Right.
And here again, I've got to mention he's with Spider-Man because Tom Holland does one of the voices of the animals.
Yes, he's the dog with glasses.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, did they really do this? So that was a little humor that I thought was fun. But as I mentioned, this is really different from the version you're used to seeing. And because of that, there are some funny moments, but that fun feel that was in the trilogy that Disney did prior to this, it's just not here. There's a lot of seriousness to it.
Yeah.
And it's just is a whole different take that I think really probably takes more from the original that we saw that was made in the late 50s.
Most likely, 60s. Yeah. And the humor mostly comes from the animals. That's where really all of the humor comes from, the dialogue of the animals, the him interacting with them. That's really it. I mean, the humans don't do anything that really funny in terms of, physical comedy or dialogue. They all have to work off the animals that are not there really because it's all realistic CGI and John Cena and Tom Holland's people doing the voices of these animals, and they all got their quirky little personalities. So I guess it's him working off all the animals instead. They even get to a point where, okay, dragons exist, dinosaurs exist, this exists. It's like, okay, all fantasy creatures is a canon now. For this movie, it starts to kind of lose a little bit of. It's supposed to be, I guess, grounded in reality. The only thing that's kind of out of the ordinary is he can talk to animals. But then you get dragons in, and you got these myths and legends and stuff. So they stopped being grounded in reality and started being more of a fantasy. So it almost feels like it's like two different movies.
Right.
When you get to the like the other half of the movie, it feels like a adventure movie all of a sudden and a fantasy one.
Now, as always, Robert Downey Jr. is awesome in this movie in terms of his performance, and the voice actors, as you said, during the moments where there is humor and fun, they're fantastic, and you get the jokes and you laugh. But I think because, and this is a spoiler here, so if you haven't seen it, you want to, it's time to
cut off the video.
Don't cut it off, just fast forward. The death of his wife looms heavily in this movie, and it affects him.
Yeah.
Through more than half of the movie, this affects him.
Yeah.
And then toward the end of the movie, it still affects him. And that takes away from a lot of the joy you probably would have, because you remember watching the prior Dolittle trilogy, the wife was still alive. He and the wife and the daughter were a family. Mm-hmm. And in the original, we don't know because we bowed out. But in here, he's by himself. No children, no wife, no anything. And he's bitter and he doesn't want to be bothered. And that portrayal really weighs heavily on this movie actually bringing you probably the more joy it could have brought if that were not the premise.
Right. And more of the joy is just, like I said, it comes from the animals. Everything relies on the animals, because Dolittle is not, unless you see him working off the animals, to us, he's not that fun to watch. He's so upset over this. It's affected his whole life, his whole mental stability, that it's not as fun. And it's no longer presented as a comedy. The animals are funny, even if they go through some things. It's still funny. But for him, and the movie's about him, it doesn't have that effect. You got the ostrich, the polar bear, the gorilla, you got a macaw, a giraffe, the dog, who's barely in it because you got too many big stars in it.
Right.
So they chose to have Tom play a small role. Like, yeah, that was a good option. And they put all of these stars in here. And then what's even stranger is that they're supposed to be in a different time period in the England. But they all have American accents, and they all say modern day slang, like bro, and dab, and bruh. And they do like, well, okay, are you from the future or something? Because now none of it fits, because they're all American, right? They're all American animals in England. Like, did they transfer? Did they get influenced or what? Suddenly they're speaking in modern day, and they're in another time period. So that also takes away something. Felt like they were saying this. You should know internet slang and things. You're animals.
So either it should have been modern day with the modern animals, or the 1800s with 1800 animals, but not both.
Right.
So I do agree 100% that does also take away from the authenticity of seeing this movie in the time period they say it's at. So, it was rented?
Yes.
We saw it through Redbox. It is not on Netflix, and you would have to buy it or rent it. And if you haven't seen it, you may want to give it a try. If you just want to see, is this something you're going to enjoy? If you really just like the Dolittle franchise and it doesn't matter, you just want to see it. But for us, it was an okay movie. We're happy to hear a lot of voices of actors we like, but it was okay. And personally, I think for the movie of the role and movie for Robert Downey Jr. to do after the Avengers, this wasn't it. He should have been given something of much higher caliber, much more interesting, and more befitting of his talents and his personality.
Right. And I get they want to do a different take. They want to do something you hadn't really seen yet, and maybe they were trying to portray this as a family film, as something fun and adventurous, exciting with animals. When you get to it, you You have the pessimist wife. You have them constantly talking about it. You even meet her father, who can't stand Doolittle because he thinks it's his fault. You got a tiger in there that wants to eat him because he's got some personal family issues, which was probably the funniest part of the movie. And the animals almost take a back seat to the story, and what you're supposed to be enjoying isn't there. Like, it's not connecting.
Right. So if you've seen this movie and you enjoyed it, let us know what you think in the comments below. If you didn't enjoy it, tell us, is it because of the same reasons we found, or did you find other reasons?
Yeah.
Either way, let us know what you think in the comments below.
Yeah, who knows? You might actually love this version. And be sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get updates on future podcasts and multiple Paws videos.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for watching. I'm Ask Entertainment.
And I'm Mom Entertainment.
Have a toontastic day.
Peace.
And reporters sitting, flashing lights, trying to walk around, man, who the hell are you? What you wanna do? Well, man, it's on you. Man, it's on you. With her in my dreams, she was my queen. A castle in the mountaintops, rivers and streams. Plucking sunlight from the sky in my pocket, give it to you later on in